The 1325's pillars, the participation, protection, empowerment, and so forth. Again, women do participate, but it's very limited. You see them in the police force, you see them in, again, peace negotiations, but again, as technical support staff and so forth. We're still behind in terms of the political, governmental decision to empower women to get there. I too applaud the fact that the room is full, and I'm very appreciative of those who are standing, and appreciative that everybody has taken the time to be here to listen to us. I think before I start, I cannot but agree with what Sarah has said, and that is really a reflection of the Palestinian context as well. And Palestinian women, although historically, and this is part of my presentation, of course, and it's here for you, I'm not going to go through it all because it's a bit long, but I'll just share the highlights with you. And I leave the presentation for you to look at. I think historically, Palestinian women have played some role in the resistance to the occupation, even dating back to the period of 1948, following the so-called Nakba in Arabic, which is the 48 war resulting in the huge refugee crisis. It was natural for women to become socially involved at the time. It was also acceptable socially for women at the time to be part of the charitable work, the civil society work, the support for the refugees. However, it wasn't a decision made by the leadership at the time that women should be included. So this was not an agenda issue. This was not a feminist issue. It was social participation because the Nakba befell all Palestinians. There were a lot of female refugees as well, of course, as male and female. So there was a lot of support in that context. And the same continued to happen in the refugee camps, where women also played a role, but again, not in the political sense that we are speaking of concerning the language and the pillars and the agenda of 1325. 1325. I'm just getting it wrong, so bear with me. Sarah will correct me with the numbers.
It's just a number.
I know words, but she will correct me with the numbers. And the same also happened following 1967 war. More formalization, however, more awareness of women's issues as an agenda item. Nevertheless, it was not a political decision by the leadership to get women involved as women per se. But however, the situation that befell the Palestinians as a consequence to these successive wars led women to participate, and it became also socially acceptable at the time for women to join the resistance to the occupation and so forth and so on. So women did play a role at that level. I'm going to fast forward to the present day for a moment, and then we put things for you in the context of the resolution 1325. When the Palestinian Authority was formed in 1994, and we started adopting our legislation, we adopted the basic law, which is our constitution basically, then we adopted the election law and so forth. The basic law secured the rights of all Palestinians, so to education, to shelter, and so forth, these basic rights, freedom of persecution. So it applied to all members of society, including women. The election law gave a quota to women. I share, and then let me share also with you the fact that I don't know where I am with the slide, of course. Haven't a clue where I got reached. Here you go. But I'll leave it for you. There I am. It secured certain rights, and women also became ministers, joined the government institutions, professional associations like lawyers, doctors, and so forth and so on. and more and more women in civil society organizations, and they maintained, however, their charitable role and function. And again, this has been and continues to be until today the more acceptable role for women to play. Then we get to the negotiations. As a Palestinian woman myself, I've been involved, as Natasha mentioned, in negotiations since 1994. Most of us who have joined were there because of our professional capacity or as so-called technical staff. You have the administrative staff consisting primarily of women, and then you have the technical staff involved in the technical committees of the negotiations, i.e. the support to the negotiators. How many of us have really, and although I have a title, I head the legal committee to the final status negotiations, am I a decision maker? And I tell you, no, definitely not. Is that right or wrong? I wish it were more. I wish I were more involved in decision making. But I think the structure of the negotiating team has not reached the level where us women have been able to move and allowed to break that glass ceiling in terms of becoming negotiators. None of us have been there we've been in the audience with respect to the witnessing of the agreements, but we have not been a witness. There are, I think, a couple of other women that have reached a more advanced level, and members of the PLO committees and so forth and so on. But again, the role remains limited and negligible. I think what also, we've made some inroads, and at the same time we have moved backwards, especially now with respect to the national schism between Fatah and Hamas. The Gaza Strip situation vis-a-vis women's issues has been really regressing, and the rights of women in Gaza are very grim. They suffer from two levels of, I would say, discrimination, if I may use that word. The number one is the fact that they share that, of course, with the males there and the children, the fact that Gaza remains under blockade and a siege of the worst order. So their humanitarian conditions are very, very difficult. And on top of that, we add the fact that the ideology that Hamas espouses does not engage women in any way. So any progress that women made in Gaza alongside the women in the West Bank has regressed in terms of how they are treated. I'd like to also mention another fact. As a Jerusalem resident myself and a Jerusalemite, women in Jerusalem and East Jerusalem, us Palestinians, we do feel that we don't have the opportunities that are available to our male colleagues because of the special conditions of East Jerusalem, under occupation on the one hand and not so much under occupation. I mean, Jerusalem, for those of you who don't know, is legally annexed to Israel. However, it remains occupied territory and occupied land. And so unemployment, for example, among women in East Jerusalem is the highest in the entire area, higher than in the West Bank. Because you have a situation where women in the West and East Jerusalem do not want to go much to the west side or to Israel to work in Israel. Women in East Jerusalem don't get to the West Bank, to Ramallah and the West Bank cities to work there because the opportunities are not so available. I mean, there's very high unemployment already in the West Bank. So the jobs are available more to men, and the commute with the roadblocks and the checkpoints are very complicated. So women in Jerusalem have a very, very hard time finding employment. So they are underprivileged and underpaid and so forth and so on. So there are particular situations, scenarios, conditions, this is my point, for women in general. Now, if I were to again fast forward and move to 1325, formally the Palestinian Authority did adopt the resolution. Okay, I mentioned all of this. However, while we formally adopted it, I think what the question would be, what have we done to implement it? Have we adopted, have we created the national action plans, the national committees? Have we engaged civil society? Have we increased the participation of women in political decision making and so forth and so on? And the answer is not. No, we have not. Have we empowered women on their issues? Again, the answer, again, we as a Palestinian Authority, no, we have not. Has the PLO engaged more and more women in terms of negotiators? Definitely not. So the implementation of 1325 remains limited and of very limited impact. I know 1325 talks about the status of women in refugee camps, and that has been a very powerful actually point for women, and strong point, and there's strong presence and participation, but again, not in decision making. But still, it's a very good step. I mean, you know. 1325 addresses the issue of women's of violence against women, while I think the basic law and the Palestinian Arab culture to some extent does preserve women's rights in terms of violence committed by the government against it, you know, in terms of imprisonment and so forth and so on. I think we have high incidence of domestic violence, and the Palestinian Authority has not addressed domestic violence at all. There are a lot of social working groups, civil society groups, women's legal rights groups that have addressed women's the violence, both sexual and physical, against women and girls especially. But again, it is not at that level where the government has addressed it. I leave you with some statistics based on surveys done in terms of the psychological, again, sexual violence and so forth and so on, but I don't want to belabor you with that right now. 1325 calls for national action plans. The Palestinian has supported some of the civil society organizations that have adopted the resolution and have worked with it, but have not made, again, any financial support available to them, any empowerment available to them, and so forth. In terms of the 1325's pillars, the participation, protection, empowerment, and so forth, again, women do participate, but it's very limited. You see them in the police force, you see them in, again, peace negotiations, but again, as technical support staff and so forth. We're still behind in terms of the political, governmental decision to empower women to get there. I mentioned the issue of protection. Prevention. We did adopt the national laws that preserve women's rights, and as I mentioned, the election law does give a quota, and there are women who participate in the legislative council, who participate, that's our parliament, and who participate in ministries and government and so forth, but again, it's limited. It's okay, I don't need that. Let me, how am I doing on time? Okay, because I'd like to move to the conclusion, really. and share with you that although here we are. I think, as I would say, as a woman and somebody who's been involved as an attorney, as a practicing attorney, as a negotiator, as a founder of several organizations, a civil society, women issues are very much at the forefront of this in terms of discussion in Palestine. There's a lot of awareness. I'll tell you, when I established my law firm way back in 1997, I had a very low rate of keeping young male attorneys on board, because as a female head of a law firm, they were kind of shamed that they have a female boss. So, but the young attorneys understood that they were getting superb training, because I was really giving solid training. So my male trainees and the lawyers were very much sought after by other law firms and the government because of the training. But many of them did not stay on with the firm because, again, they were ashamed that they had a female attorney who was very tough, very rough, and would just give them a hard time and require very high professional standards. Today, they're staying with the firm. So my point is that over the last 20 years or so, there has been a change in terms of the attitude. There is, again, more acceptance and more support for women in business, women in different professions, but again and again, we have not been able to move forward and get involved in more decision-making at the political level. The government does not preclude, of course, women, professional women, but they don't support us, and they don't create the programs and the agendas for us. In terms of 1325, and I will end with this, I would say from a social gender perspective, the resolution has been of limited impact. But from a political national rights perspective, it has been more implemented and supported, and there's more awareness about it, because I think it goes hand in hand with our national struggle for freedom and for our own statehood and becoming a sovereign state. And thank you for listening. Perhaps, just a remark. I think maybe you can answer probably the first two. More of an observation as a resident of East Jerusalem on the ultra-Orthodox, and I think the scenario and the situation, the safety and security in East Jerusalem today for the Israelis and the Palestinians alike, depending on how you look at it, and who's the victim and who's the aggressor. I think we're both victims and aggressors. But generally speaking, I would say from a Palestinian perspective, we feel that the entire Jerusalem municipality, in terms of also the national decision making at the Israeli level, is supporting serious aggression by the ultra-Orthodox, by the police forces and the special security forces, the Israeli special security forces, against civilian Palestinians, and the women and children are targeted. So while there is violence committed by Palestinians, I think the greater violence we feel is the one that is being committed by the state. There is state violence against Palestinians in East Jerusalem. It is systematic, it's a policy, and there is undue process of the law. Where people are targeted, they are killed on the spot without due process and without a trial, without an attorney, and all of that is happening, and it is called self-defense. And I think that several video tapes have shown that there are actually no attacks, that no violence has been committed, no attack towards an Israeli has been perpetrated. So again, it's the state violence against the civilian population. In terms of the Palestinian mission here, I applaud that and I salute you. And I think I agree with you, there's more women participation in the decision making at the diplomatic level. We see Palestinian women ambassadors, and of course they are decision makers. So that's a very good start and a very good step, and I appreciate your sharing that with us. I think it's very inspiring what the ambassador just mentioned, and I cannot agree more, and I think this goes along with what Brenda has been saying, and actually with my concluding remarks. I mean, I think so long as we are under occupation, both men and women and children are not going to be able to realize our potential and move forward. So any discussion related to women in particular would not be even at that high level of an agenda item. So there's no two-way about it, but to become a sovereign state so we can act as a sovereign state, a recognized state, and realize our more basic political rights as a nation. In terms of the anti-normalization on women's issues in particular,
on the ability for women's peace organizations to work together.
Big impact, big impact. I mean, and it goes to the media issue. I think the reason pre-intifada and pre-anti-normalization and pre-boycott and BDS and so forth, there was a lot of interaction. And we knew each other a bit better. Today, I mean, in East Jerusalem, it's gotten so bad with the roadblocks and the checkpoints and the so forth, and the seizure against Gaza and the blockade against Gaza, that we don't know each other. And even worse, from going from East Jerusalem to West Jerusalem. So you can imagine, there are no roadblocks right there, but the psychological barriers have become so immense, and we don't know each other anymore.